Okay, perfect. No? Okay. Got it? Okay. Sorry about that, everyone. Welcome. My name is Rita Mayer. I'm editor-in-chief of Food Logistics and Supply and Management Executive. And welcome to our first of many Women in Supply Chain Forum events. We're so excited to have you here. Before we start, I just wanted to remind everybody that the dinner tonight, or the cocktail reception is on the 27th floor upstairs. Very exciting. And if you have not found the bathrooms yet, I've been there 3 times already. It's just outside and around the corner. So if you have any questions, the wonderful women at our front desk will help you. So first of all, I just wanted to kind of open it up before we go to the star of the show tonight. Just kind of bring you up to speed on how this came about. We created the Women in Supply Chain Award during COVID when, things were crazy in my life. I have 2 kids at home, remote learning. It was like, why not create something that creates more work for myself? And we did it anyway because it was that important. It mattered to me, it mattered to the people I deal with on a regular basis, and it has really taken off into now its 3rd year and growing, and here we have our first in-person, which we were going to do regardless of what was going on in the world. And so here we are. And so I wanted to provide a little bit of stats on this award because it's kind of proof as to the growth and evolution of what it has become. So we wanted to cover about how many men have nominated their female counterparts over the past 3 years of the awards history, and then break that down into how many women nominated themselves over the past 3 years. And that's important because one of the things we're talking about is self-advocacy. So in 2020, 28 men, and this is the first year of the award, 28 men nominated their female counterparts, while just 6 female leaders nominated themselves. In 2021, 60 men, so we're growing, nominated their female counterparts, while 10 nominated themselves. In 2022, this year with this award, 75 men nominated their female counterparts, and 12, so we have an uptick of 2, female leaders nominated themselves. So these numbers are increasing. They're showing that what we're doing is working, that this collective community where it's not just women, we need the men too. There are some men in our audience. Welcome. Happy to have you here. Thank you. And so one of the things we're talking about is self-advocacy. And I'm going to introduce somebody who really doesn't need an introduction at all. Everybody, Sarah Barnum-Humphrey. She is the host of Let's Talk Supply Chain podcast. And somebody who I've become close with over the past couple of years, just because we share this mission together. And so why not join forces and create the better for the common good? So I'm going to pass things over to Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And I think, thank you so much for having me up here on stage and at your Women in Supply Chain event. I don't know if you all know this, but I started a Women in Supply Chain podcast and blog series back in 2018. And it's really important, I think, and the reason why we're going to do the keynote the way that we're doing it tonight is that we support each other as women in supply chain. It's not just about me coming up here and telling my journey, it's also about Marina's journey. And it's also about how we support each other, and that's what we're doing tonight. We also want this event to be very much audience participation. So we're going to do that tonight. We're going to ask you guys some questions, and then at the end of this, we're also going to open it up to ask us anything. Not just ask me anything, but ask us anything. So get your questions ready, because we definitely want to make this interactive. We want this to be engaging. We want to have a little bit of fun. But to kick us off, I think we're going to start with our journeys. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about my journey in supply chain, and it started all the way back when I was 9 years old. So my parents owned a freight forwarding company, and some of you may have heard this story before, but they owned a freight forwarding company, and so we talked about supply chain and logistics at the dinner table. So I say that supply chain is in my blood because it really has been a part of the conversation since I was very, very, very young. When I was 16, I went to work at the family business, and I was filing. I think I was filing and answering phones and maybe sending faxes. Yes, I was sending faxes. I think I was still typing on a typewriter back in 2016. But anyways, that's besides the point. And so right after high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I went straight to the family business, even after working for summers, because I just loved what was happening in logistics and supply chain. So I started off as reception, and I worked my way up. So I worked in trucking, I did sales, like I did door-to-door sales. My dad sent me to the worst places in Toronto to go and do door-to-door sales, and I'm surprised that I lived to tell about it, but anyway. And then I was in operations for 8 years. So I did imports, exports, customs, warehousing, you name it. I did everything. And all the while I was also doing courses by correspondence. So I was trying to figure out where I wanted to be in supply chain. I did project management courses. I did international trade courses where I got my designation in international trade. What else did I do? I had side hustles. I was a business manager for a cosmetics company and all sorts of things because I was trying just to figure out what I wanted to do, what I was good at, what I wasn't good at. And then I was in sales for 8 years. And that was a pretty interesting time. I started sales in 2008, which was probably not the best year to be in sales. But I was on a mission to cut down all of the customs charges in Canada, and so I actually did $250,000 in sales that year because I got a lot of business from just going in and just doing a better job than who was there before me. And then in 2016, I was director of sales and marketing, and I thought, well, there's got to be a better way of doing this. I looked at marketing and supply chain, it was really kind of dry. And I was listening to a lot of podcasts at the time, and I thought, well, hey, if Lewis Howes can do this, why can't Sarah Barnes Humphrey? And if you guys don't know who Lewis Howes is, he's got the School of Greatness podcast, and it's really, really good even to this day. I think he's got over 1,000 episodes. And so I asked a guy from my customs department if he would be my co-host on my podcast, and he said yes. And tongue-in-cheek, we called it 2 Days Talk Supply Chain. It's a guy, it's a girl, it's kind of funny. And the first episode was absolutely horrible. We tried to do it over Skype. I think you can still find it on YouTube. It was one of my worst episodes ever. Go and find it. It's really horrible. And so we just started doing podcast episodes. And, you know, I had a marketing team at that time. And then in the fall of 2017, my dad ended up closing his doors. It was probably the worst day of my life. Because ever since I was 16 years old, I wanted to take over that company. Really badly. So when he closed his doors, I had nowhere to go. So I lost my co-host, I lost my team, but I had companies that were paying to come on the podcast. I had companies that were paying to come on the show. So I had to keep it going. And I was like, how am I going to do this? So I taught myself social media. I taught myself website design, graphic design, and I just kept it going. And in January 2018, I started the Women in Supply Chain series. Not because of women empowerment, I just wanted to learn from every single one of you. I just wanted to hear your story. How did you get to the position that you're in? How did you get started? What did that look like? But by April 2018, no women would come on a show called 2 Days Talk Supply Chain. Yeah. So I rebranded it to Let's Talk Supply Chain, and I did that within a week, which I do not suggest anybody to do. That was the craziest week of my life. But the rest is history. So we have grown. I now have a team of 14 people. We do all sorts of things. We now have a second podcast called the Blended Podcast. And that's where I bring 5 different people from different walks of life together to talk about diversity and inclusion in the workplace. I wanted to, I think it was February 2020, I was like, it's got to be more than just gender. And so on my live show, I told everybody I was going to do something. And I had no idea what it was. And everybody kept asking, what are you going to do, what are you going to do? And so by July 2020, I wanted to do a red table talks for diversity and inclusion. And so I started in October 2020. And then in October 2021, I wanted to do even more, and which is kind of crazy, kind of like you.
Yeah, right. I stopped there, you know.
And we started a nonprofit called the Blended Pledge. And so now we give away grants to diverse voices so they can say yes to speaking engagements to cover their travel expenses. And so that's a little bit about my journey. What about your journey?
So my journey started out obviously on the editorial B2B publishing side of things. First job out of college, and age myself, I graduated from college in 2002. And so I remember covering an event, you're a journalist, they always give you the worst assignments possible, and you take it because that's how you work your way up. And I remember sitting in a room, and I remember looking around going, wow, I'm the only female in this room, and I'm probably the only person under the age of 40, 45. So that was eye-opening. But then it became a reoccurring thing. I'd go to different press conferences and different events and different shows, trade shows even, all men, all up and down the aisles. There was no woman around. And I just remember thinking, if I'm going through this, I can't imagine it being just me. It has to be other places. And at the time, I wasn't covering supply chain. I was covering food processing, the end result of that. And I thought to myself, there has to be something else out there. And then I entered the supply chain world by default. The job was open. I was in a really bad spot. I just had my daughter. People I reported to were not the nicest. And you're kind of in that moment where you just had your kid and you're like, I don't need this. I don't need to deal with this. This is crazy. I need this job. I don't need you treating me that way. So this position opened up in another magazine that happened to be in supply chain, and I knew nothing about supply chain. That's why I hired people who know nothing about supply chain, because I knew the infrastructure of how it worked, to put out a brand, to build a brand, and to network and connect with people. I'll learn the other stuff. So I learned supply chain, and it was like the cornerstone turning point for the job. They were very supportive of the fact that, hey, I love my job, I love my family first, and that's how it has to be. So you have to find those people that support that and share that with you. And so I've just continued through the years, taken that and instilled that in other people as I worked through that. But this is not what I saw in 2003, 2004. This is amazing. So I'm just excited that we've come to a point where our voices are welcome and heard, and